Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. I'm Gloria Gavin, and I track and sessions. This morning, we will be hearing about how augmented reality will change the future of retail and how we'll get there. Today, our moderator, is Amy Peck, which ATC Vive, and we have a few housekeeping issues to get through before we get started. A few housekeeping notes. We have a short Q&A following the presentation, so feel free to use the chat to ask your questions, and we'll try to get to as many as possible following the presentation. AWE would like to remind you to watch the Augie Awards on the main line stream May 29th at 11:50. And we'd also like to thank our titanium sponsors, HP, Microsoft, Qualcomm, and Unity, as well as our gold sponsor, all of their support. And with that, we'll get started. Over to our moderator, Amy.
For joining us. We have a great panel today. And I'd like to introduce Cynthia Mahler from Walmart ECommerce, Daniel Beauchamp from Shopify, and my dear friend Tony Parisi from Unity Technologies, Shrenik Sadalgi from Wayfair, and Boaz Ashkenazy from Simply Augmented. Now that I got through everybody, Cynthia, why don't you start and introduce yourself, and we'll just sort of run down the line and tell us a little bit more about your role.
Thanks so much. I'm happy to be here. So I work for Walmart ECommerce, which actually encompasses some verticals as well that have been acquired. And I look after the creative end of 3D content creation and anything that's considered next gen. And I use that term really internally because that's how people understand it. It's a bit of an old term. And I'm happy to be here. It's pretty simple.
Excellent.
Awesome. Hey there. So likewise, super excited to be here. So I lead the augmented and virtual reality team at Shopify. So if you're not familiar, Shopify is a platform that powers over 1 million brands worldwide, merchants selling products. And my team's role is figuring out how can we give tools to our merchants to get them ready for the spatial computing future.
And Boaz.
Hi, happy to be here. My name is Boaz Ashkenazy, and I'm the CEO of Simply Augmented. And we are a 3D agency and platform, and we help manufacturers and businesses leverage 3D and social media, 3D commerce. I also co-chair on the Khronos group, a 3D commerce working group, and we're working to help set the standard for 3D on the web.
Excellent. Tony.
Tony Parisi, Unity AR and VR ad innovation lead. Unity is the leading real-time 3D creation platform, and we believe the future of retail is immersive. So we're excited to be on this panel to talk about how 3D technologies can power that. My particular lens into that is advertising, all the upper funnel stuff that gets people engaging with your products before you then decide to purchase.
Excellent. And Shrenik is going to introduce himself, but also going to share really exactly why we're here and tell us a little bit more about Khronos.
Everyone, happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me. My name is Shrenik Sadalgi. I am the director of R&D at Wayfair. I run basically the R&D function. Think of it as an innovation lab. It's a small team called Wayfair Next. And our job is to figure out what's next in home and retail. So we're trying to figure out how to use emerging technologies to figure out how to solve customer problems and then see how that intersects with the evolution of retail and home. I'm also the chair of the 3D commerce working group, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. And so let me just jump right into like who 3D commerce is and what we do. All right, hopefully everyone can see my screen. So just to answer the question, like why are we all here today in terms of like, why is Walmart here? Why Shopify here? Wayfair, Simply Augmented, and Unity. This specific set of people. So just think about how when you experience something like a view in room 3D experience on your phone, like when you can see a virtual product on your phone in your space, basically an AR experience, right? How does that happen? Like what are the pieces that are involved in making that experience happen, right? So just think of the supply chain for digital content. So the 3D virtual product that you're seeing is basically an asset, right? It's just like an image. So how is that produced? So if you take a peek into the supply chain of this digital content, manufacturers for manufacturing, let's say shoes or furniture or cars or radios or whatever it is, they're basically trying to figure out how to sell their products online through retailers, right? So the manufacturer basically is producing the physical product, but at the same time they may be producing the image itself, or they're trying to figure out how to merchandise the product or help the retailers out, right? So when they create this image or this or 3D model of the product, they use content creators such as Simply Augmented, who in turn use 3D tools such as Autodesk or 3ds Studio 3ds Max or any of their products to produce this digital content. They then hand it over to the retailer, who figures out how to put the whole package together, and then the retailer in turn uses some kind of technology platform, maybe Unity in this case, to produce a view in room experience that you finally see on the phone or on your computer, right? Now this is great. So this supply chain works well. Now, when you think beyond the view in room experience, and you think about an ad, a 3D ad, for example, on Unity, the same supply chain holds true. But now what's happening is that there are a bunch of manufacturers, a bunch of retailers, and a bunch of platforms that these ads are going to be running on, right? And so this problem gets a lot more complicated because you have multiple retailers distributing the products to multiple retailers. And the retailers in turn are using multiple platforms that end users are finally using, right? So in this complicated network, what happens is that the definition of a virtual product gets lost because nobody agrees on what a virtual product is. Today, that's the case today. Just like how you have, for images, you have a standard like JPEG where everyone understands what JPEGs are. You don't have that for virtual products. And that's what 3D commerce is trying to solve. We're trying to figure out what does a virtual product mean, and how can we get everyone to agree on that definition of a virtual product. That's the goal of 3D commerce. And so we work with other standards groups such as GLTF, WebGL, OpenXR, and Vulkan and so we're basically trying to drive the requirements for some of these other standards bodies to produce standards for virtual products in commerce. And so we believe that today, when you think about merchandising a product, you use an image, right? You cannot sell a product online without having an image for it. Very soon, we're going to get to a stage where you cannot merchandise a product without a 3D representation of the product that will be experienced through an immersive experience online. So that's the state that we're going to get to. And in order to get there, we need to define what a virtual product is in the first place.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. So let's kind of dive right in and really talk about what the sort of future of retail holds. And I know, Boaz, you're building a lot of these assets for companies. Can you talk a little bit about just a strategy that companies can use to start to begin this journey into really moving through, into this realm?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most manufacturers right now are looking for ways to leverage this technology, both in marketing and sales. And we're seeing 3D show up in a lot of different places, certainly on folks' websites. And also, a lot of times now we're seeing both advertising and social media being a platform where a lot of this 3D content gets leveraged. And And then, finally, the retail platforms are also a place where we're starting to see more and more content happen. Shopify, Wayfair have been way ahead, Amazon. And so the manufacturers that are reaching out to me understand that online retail is happening, and they especially understand how 3D can really jumpstart their experience and their customers' experience.
Yeah, and so Tony, you're taking a long look at this as well, and looking and sort of helping companies think about monetizing. What are some of the strategies now, sort of that next stage? So they've built their assets, and how are they going to be able to monetize?
Well, I mean, the monetization that we power at Unity is largely for our app and game publishers, right? I mean, so this is a mobile advertising platform. The key here is that we need to link up the creation of these 3D assets. These are from Boaz's end of the spectrum to a consumer being able to experience them. And they're going to experience them in a few ways. They may thoughtfully go to a Shopify powered website because they know they're looking for stuff from that specific manufacturer, that specific brand. And so they'll interact in 3D because Shopify has provided the tools to do that. They may go to a Wayfair to do this as well, or to Walmart's front door in their app, which is now apparently the top shopping app. Way to go, Cynthia. I'm sure you had a lot to do with that. And that's one way that people are going to experience 3D content, but more often than not, they may also just be finding it serendipitously in the form of advertising. And that's what Unity does in this case, where we're allowing our game publishers to monetize through advertising, typically by advertising other people's games. But within that stream, we have a small chunk of brand advertising that's delivered as well. And within that, we can do augmented reality or 3D that you interact with the product in, and then move optionally to augmented reality. And what's great about that flow is that folks discover products serendipitously and, potentially and most likely organically, in the sense that these ads can also be targeted, they're going to be somewhat relevant to them. So that's just a completely different flow for getting the consumers to interact with these products. Otherwise, we're back to what Shrenik sort of opened with, which is I've got a shopping app, I know what I'm doing and I'm looking for that. That's great in a lot of cases, but it's not the way that people discover everything. They're searching, they're in social, they're in these game environments. So again, all of that Unity employs to empower our game publishers to monetize.
And then Daniel, so I'd love to hear also just some of the ways that you're helping, your kind of e-commerce. I mean, you've got, millions and millions of users. What kind of traction are you seeing, and what are some of the tools that you're using to enable their 3D landscape?
Yeah, so we're seeing some really great traction with AR and 3D with our merchants who have 3D models of their products. They're seeing that their customers are up to 2.5 times more likely to buy when they interact with 3D versus when they don't see a 3D model, which is huge. And the reason why you're getting that increase in conversion is fairly obvious. Unlike a product photo where you just see this product from one specific angle, now you can see the actual product, how it will look like in your space, how big is it, and see it from any angle. It's happened too many times where I'm shopping online and I see something, I go, oh, but what does it look like from the back or underneath? And with a 3D model, you can actually spin it, you can actually see it from any angle you want. And the challenge for, I'm getting a little bit of feedback.
Yeah, we have somebody kind of chatting in our ear. Yes.
Okay, I think we're back.
Sorry about that. I don't know where that came from, this disembodied voice.
No worries. But we want to make sure that ability to provide an AR experience to view a product is accessible across or available to all of our merchants. And it's democratizing that tech. Whether you are a huge multinational brand with huge budgets and whatnot, or whether you are a mom and pop shop down the street, or someone in your basement getting started with a t-shirt business, you should have access to the same tools that everyone else has. And that means making it easy to get those 3D models, so connecting them with partners like Simply Augmented, getting the models made in a format that can then be used in multi-channel. So like to Tony's point, you could have it on a Shopify store, but if you are also selling on Instagram, you should have an Instagram ads or on a Pinterest board or anywhere where you start supporting 3D, which more and more platforms nowadays are adding 3D support. That same file should be able to be used in all those areas, and have that sort of available to all of our merchants is our focus.
So that's a pretty tremendous number, 2.5 times more likely. And then this notion, and I think you made a great point that, it's not necessarily these, our large retailers, like we have, 2 here today with Walmart and Wayfair, but that this shouldn't feel daunting to, smaller companies, because also consumers, this sort of notion of these, artisanal goods that, literally mom and pops are creating in their homes in a lot of cases. And certainly right now they're creating them in their homes. So I think that's a fantastic point. But I think on the other end of the spectrum, I'd love to hear, let's start with Shrenik. From your perspective, you've got, hundreds of thousands of products. How do you decide where to get started? And again, are you seeing those same numbers, 2.5? Are you seeing more or less? Because I'd love to get more data for everyone, because that's what everyone always asks for.
Yeah, I can definitely say that we're in the same ballpark. Like I think we're seeing that an augmented reality experience, so basically what we call a view in room experience, is definitely increasing conversions, and it's in the same ballpark that Dan was mentioning, which is interesting to see. Like, I mean, it's good that all of us are seeing a positive uptick in the effect of these experiences, right? And in terms of like where do we get, so it's definitely worth it. From like the investment is worth it. So where do we get started? And that's one of the things that we're actually trying to do. Like, we're trying to publish a set of guidelines, and like actually Boaz has been like leading the effort on that inside of the ECommerce group, where we will very soon publish a set of guidelines to tell people or to educate people on how to produce these assets so that they can be reused in a bunch of different scenarios. The way we started these, like, just to kind of comment on that, we were just experimenting, and that's kind of what my team does, and what most of Wayfair does actually. So we were experimenting. We figured out that this seems like an interesting way to merchandise products. So when you think of like how merchandising is going to evolve, this was a very obvious, like, especially for online retail, being able to see products in the context of your own space, be it furniture, be it electronics, whatever it is, right? It's definitely the next. Why go to a store if you can bring the store to you, right? That's kind of one of the really powerful use cases of augmented reality. But there are lots of, the interesting thing is that most of the heavy lifting is being done by folks like Unity or Apple or Google. Most of the OEMs are letting you basically figure out how to produce this 3D model first, and the showing of building the experience itself is already going to be done by somebody else. All you need to do is just figure out how to produce this asset, right? And that's kind of what the problem is going to boil down to. So it's like if you had a photography studio, you were able to produce images, right? So just like that, you need to have a digital studio that produces these 3D assets using 3D tools.
That's great. And I feel like it's getting easier and easier. And Cynthia, I know I left you to the last, but you've done such a tremendous job with Walmart, and the engagement factors are enormous. So can you just talk a little bit about the evolution and how it all started and kind of where you've landed today?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with the customer, right? Like, if I don't advocate as a customer internally, then I could just go into the parking lot and shout because nobody cares. So, and Shrenik probably agrees, everything that we do really is driven by the customer. And I come from old school branding where the company used to decide what the brand was and tell the customer. And now the customer tells us, like, literally, they're going to tell us what we need to create, how we need to serve it up. So as I advocate internally, I have to keep it simple like that. because if I don't talk about the customer, we run the risk of this being something cool that is just done somewhere in a dark room, and it's really cool, but it's not now. It's not what people want now. And this really interesting thing happens that I've learned is when things like this catch fire, everybody talks about it, but there are a large number of people who don't actually get it. And I like to arm the executives and every individual contributor with the actual information, because you see the light bulb go off. And in Silicon Valley especially, and I know maybe this is stereotype, nobody wants to be the least smart person in the room. Everybody really wants to look like they know what they're talking about and be able to have a conversation. So part of what I do internally, making the assets and building the team to make the assets is somewhat the easy part. What takes a concerted effort and a shrewd effort is advocating up the line to get the support, which usually translates into funding. But also you don't want to be the only one in the company running around talking about this. You want to actually make yourself redundant in terms of an advocate. Like when I start to hear conversations, or I even start to hear that groups I didn't know about are working on 3D for whatever reason they need, it makes me very happy, because it means that it's starting to become normalized. Photography has been normalized forever. Nobody needs to advocate why we need to take pictures. So that's one thing that I don't know, maybe I'm well suited because I'm not a technologist and I can explain things to people that also aren't. So that's mostly the success, is selling it internally as something not exotic, something that the customer just generally expects. Like if it's not there, it's going to stand out as not being there. So
I think that's a really great, actually you touched on two great points. One, that it's really about the user, because I think that sometimes, when we're using technology, we forget that, and it's a new shiny object. So I think that's fantastic that you're focused on that. But I also think it's very interesting, the challenges that I think a lot of companies are having in selling internally and selling it upstream. So Daniel, because you're dealing with a number of different types of companies, are you finding that your team is having to really share the benefits, or people coming to you and asking specifically, for 3D and how to get started?
Yeah, so it's definitely a mixed bag there. I mean, you can imagine with over 1 million merchants, we have like every single type of company out there. The people who are super enthusiastic going, wow, 3D, I don't even care if it's going to increase conversions. I just want to use it because it's shiny, it'll make me stand out, etc. But then you also have the conservative, suit and tie exec being like, oh, what's the business case here? Like, how much is this going to cost? Like, blah, blah, blah. And you have everything in between. So it's definitely been a challenge to, like, in the very early days of this, where there was no data yet, it was hard to convince some of these bigger merchants, because they go, wow, this seems like a huge investment and we don't know whether it's going to pay off. But the good thing is, like, we've been running these experiments for the past 2 years with merchants, getting the data, that now we actually have the case studies to show to people. And with those case studies, now it's kind of that snowball effect where they go, oh, shoot, like Rebecca Minkoff just had like really awesome results with her latest line that she did in 3D. Awesome. Well, I'm going to do that as well. And you start that sort of flywheel. And eventually, we want to get to a point where all of our merchants have 3D models and can offer AR experiences.
Yeah. And so Boaz, talk about also kind of the strategies, because, we've heard from Cynthia, and Shrenik on, kind of leveraging these assets, and that they have a life beyond that initial expense, because it's not inexpensive, right, to start down this path, but it does seem that it will be ubiquitous. So, what are some of that kind of, the life expectancy of these 3D assets, and how will they move from business line to business line? That's sort of like the part A question. And the part B question is, what user behaviors are we seeing that will indicate that this will be ubiquitous?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's one other part too, and a lot of manufacturers ask us at the beginning is, what do I need to give you to even get started with this process? And it's a huge range. We work with Herman Miller, and they have a lot of 3D models in their database. And then we work with other smaller manufacturers that just have photographs in their catalog. And it's really understanding what do we need to, how do we start? And so a lot of times, we can start just with photographs and spec sheets. And so a lot of manufacturers need to know that even though they may not have a lot of shop drawings and 3D models to begin with, it doesn't mean that they can't start in this process. Once they have the 3D models created, though, and as I mentioned before, you have a lot of different channels that you can take these 3D products. And the more that we can create standardization, the easier it's going to be. And so right now we have a client that has the 3D products on their website. They're also using them in Instagram for filters, because filters can go onto your face, but they can also go into the world. And they're going to take those models and hand them to their sales team. And we have a platform that we use that empowers salespeople to use those same models when they share them in Zoom meetings or face-to-face. And they can leverage those assets too, because sometimes you don't have products available that you want to show. And you can do that, with augmented reality. And then one of the things that I'm really, really excited about, and I know Google and Unity and Facebook are thinking a lot about this, is advertising. Is how do we leverage 3D in advertising where people can see something, click on it, convert, and then drop it into their environment? I think that if we see 2.5 conversion on online sites, we're going to see really, really great conversion on advertising with this technology, because it's really engaging.
Thanks
Tony,
for the
can we follow
handoff,
on?
Boaz.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I want to follow on two threads, actually. I want to talk about this first on the advertising side, and just quickly note that we're not quite in a place where we can publish numbers yet, and we're not doing, this does not directly convert to a purchase right now, so we don't have conversion metrics the way Daniel and Shrenik have talked about. But the engagement numbers we're seeing are really through the roof. People engaging with the content as 3 to 4 to 5 to 10x higher than your typical kind of other even interactive ad. And these are loose numbers. We haven't done enough case studies to even be confident enough to lean in and say, here's a number that we feel comfortable with. But the early returns are much higher engagement. Some of these kind of advertisements even get replayed because they're sort of playable experiences, which kind of leads to the point I really wanted to follow on. So far, we've been talking about the 3D asset as kind of a model, and repurposing that across multiple channels to recoup an investment, because the content creation is a bit hard. So we can go to multiple channels, from a shopping app to an ad. We've covered that in this panel. What we haven't covered is that same asset could be brought into multiple experiences. So we can take a couch that we have modeled cleverly, and it looks great, and it looks photorealistic, and it could show up as an item in a catalog, as a single thing you can spin around, as a single thing you can try in your house. That same couch could show up in a living room collection. And I know Cynthia's going to want to follow on with this one. This is something she and I talk about a lot. So that could be brought into a living room collection where the entire living room has been rendered virtually, and it's fully interactive, and also coming from the same amount, the same kind of assets. So it can be combined into a new experience. And then with game engine tech like Unity, it can be brought into something that's really cinematic. You can do a lot with this, so it becomes more than an ad. It becomes a full experience that could be sticky, something that people really find joyful as well as useful. We've talked a lot about the utility here and the conversion rates, but there's another aspect to this, which is the production value of 3D graphics. So, all of that stuff is hard to quantify. But when you think about this, just beyond the asset and its initial use in, say, a catalog, you can take this in so many places because it is a real-time interactive 3D model. So I feel like we should be talking about that part too, as through the lens of recouping investment, as well as just the capabilities it unlocks, because it's incredible, and we haven't had anything like that before. And that's why Unity's into this, because of what we can do with real-time 3D in general.
Well, that was a handoff. So Cynthia.
Yeah. I don't want to bash on traditional photography because it actually got us here. But, when you're working on operationally and you're working on budgets and things like that, being able to talk about, when you're in retail, being able to talk about real-time reaction to the very real issue of out of stock, out of production, something's great, but you find out later for whatever reason you don't want to carry it anymore, and you've taken this beautiful photo. And I mean, I had a phone call the other day from one of the folks with whom I work on a broad sense, and again, one-to-one, they said, this particular piece of furniture is not available anymore, so can we just put another model in? Well, it's a traditional photo to begin with. So very gently, very respectfully, I have to say, I understand the instinct. I'm with you. That's a bummer. But we can't mix. And so then there's the moment of advocacy where you start to they help them understand that like Tony was saying, if you've got to start with the model creation and explaining what that is. In old school terms, and maybe older than everyone, what you would talk about in the past is the grains won't match. You used to have this composite issue in the industry where you couldn't take a photo from one instance and match it. And so those are the moments I relish because, listen, when you're a disruptor, what you get to do is meet an unmet emotional need. And so I deal with internally that there are unmet emotional needs in retail with the customer, but also internally. And we're all customers, really. So that's what I think Tony's hinting at, is that there's an unmet emotional need to have everything fit and not be looking at something that doesn't exist anymore. And when it's in front of you, there's a cognitive dissonance. And listen, nothing is more angry or, hell hath no fury like a scorned consumer. If something's not available that you're showing them and you're showing them beautifully, they're like, I don't get it. They're angry. So that's a big deal, is making sure you're starting with the basics, right? And letting people understand how to explain it to the person who's coming to them. And now it's great because now that team, we're re-upping, we're reconfiguring things. And I took that photograph. So I had to be careful on the phone. That person paid for the photo that I took 3 months ago. So
that makes sense. And Shrenik, are you finding some of those same issues at Wayfair?
Yeah, we've found that this new process of we've basically taken the photography studio and put it into a computer, right? It's basically taken the entire thing digital. Like if you see behind me, this thing is this was made with 3D models. That's a render. Like none of that stuff actually exists, but they're real representations of the product, right? So it just I think the use case is very clear to us from that there's definitely, it's not just the immersive experiences that we're able to power with 3D models, with the 3D content. We're able to basically replace photography in a way, right? So that the ROI is super high on that. But just wanted to kind of, I guess, echo something that Cynthia had said earlier, which was the normalization of photography has happened, right? The normalization of 3D is going to happen, and that's why we're all here. I think we're going to get to a point where there's going to be an explosion of 3D content online, and it's not going to be, it doesn't matter if conversion goes up or not. And somebody else mentioned this earlier too, it's the engagement that you can drive with this content, right? An AR experience or a VR experience, the engagement is a lot better, and it's so you can produce an entire brand experience with just this. Think of this as a channel, right? And this is AR VR, let's say a channel that you can leverage for showcasing your brand. It doesn't have to be just one product, it can be the entire brand. And you can engage customers in different ways, and that's where the creativity comes in, and that's why each of the brands on this call are doing it in different ways, right? But then it finally all comes down to when you're seeing an ad. Let's say when you search for a red couch or something, and you see a Walmart ad, or you see a Wayfair ad, or you see a Shopify ad on, let's say, Unity or Google, you're seeing those with respect to each other, right? And so there you need some kind of consistency. But then when you're interacting with each brand separately, that doesn't need to be consistent, and it shouldn't be consistent, right? And that's how you create a brand in the first place. So that's basically the big picture from when you think of it. The explosion is what we're trying to normalize, that part, and make sure that when we're looking at digital content, we're looking at it not from a very narrow perspective, and not from a siloed perspective, but more from a okay, this is the new thing. Like, how do we all get together and fix these problems?
That's great. And so just for the audience, please add all your questions. We only have 5 minutes, so I'm actually going to ask for kind of a closing statement from you because we have such a great panel. But we will do a blog post following the event, and we will try and address all of your questions. I would love to stay for another hour and talk to everybody here. And I think we've had some great insights, on what the ROI is, how companies can get started. But I'd love to hear from each of you, and we'll just sort of do it old school down the line. But let's just sort of project a little bit into the future. And we've seen how consumers now are just sort of starting to show us, to Cynthia's point, that they are the users, they are the consumers, and we are all these consumers. Where are we going to be in 2, 3, 5 years? Because we know we need to start building these sort of 3D asset libraries. But what are the behaviors and the drivers behind it? And if you want to give us just a little, 1 minute each, just vision of the future and where we're going to go over the next, 3 to 5 years, and what you'd like to happen. So we'll start with you, Boaz. We'll go right down the line.
Yeah, I'll let these guys talk a little bit about the consumers. I'm really excited about the 3D artist community and what the future is going to look like for that group. And a lot of the work that we're doing in the Khronos group is being able to empower them to be able to create assets. And I think that in the future, you look down the line 2 to 3 years, it's going to be very, very easy for them to create content. And it's going to be as easy as creating JPEGs are right now, and or MP3. And the idea that we would have multi-formats and it would be difficult to upload to different platforms will be a thing of the past. And it'll just be very common for people to be creating these assets. And then I think consumers the same way. Right now, when I show consumers how to use AR content, there's definitely a learning curve. That's going to go away. And it's going to be easy for people to adopt.
That's great. And Cynthia?
Well, I want to just build off of that. So I'm hearing the other voice, so I'm just going to have to talk louder. So here's the thing, right? Like, consumers always want to do it themselves. Like, they see what you're doing. And, this happened like way back when, like, that's why blogs started, right? Like, well, I want to publish my own content. I don't just want to read the news that you're publishing. So if you forecast in the future, I think it's not just that users are going to know how to create your own content. They're going to want to use our content in their content. So like, if you were to imagine a situation where on a large retail platform where I could have my own, like, okay, my own house, every room is made into a 3D model. Maybe I've done that, or you've helped me. And now, I want to put the products in, I want to build rooms, but I want to be looking at my own stuff. And I'm excited about that because users always lead the way, and they always want you show them they want to do it themselves. I mean, this is just the history of, I think, digital content for sure. So
excellent.
Yeah.
And Shrenik, Shrenik, if you'd also just add how people can get in touch with Khronos and just get some of the information and things that you'll be publishing as well as your future thoughts.
Yeah. So if you're a content producer or if you're a developer, right, this area is ripe for you. Just playing with 3D or playing with AR experiences or 3D experiences. This is definitely going to be the future of merchandising. If you're a retailer, think about that. If you're a technology platform that's not supporting 3D, you need to support 3D now, because I think like this is, there's no doubt in my mind that this is going to either replace or augment the image that you have today that's going to merchandise products. It's definitely going to be the future of merchandising, right? So that's my I guess my summary of future thoughts, at least. In terms of how you can get involved, just look up 3D commerce. If you can Google it or go to 3D commerce, I think khronos.org/3dcommerce is you'll get like exactly what we do and how to get involved there. We have an advisory forum where, as long as you sign an NDA, you can just be a part of it and just listen to what other people are saying. And if you're interested in actually contributing to the effort, then you can join the Khronos group, become a member, and actually be a part of the discussions. We meet weekly and we have a lot of momentum. We've been we've been in existence for the last like 8 months, I think, and we meet weekly, and we're seeing that the attendance in weekly meetings is pretty phenomenal. And so the discussions are very lively. And so if you want to be a part of solving this problem, then join the Khronos group and join 3D
That's great. Thanks so much. Tony.
So I'm the co-editor of a blog on Medium called The Near Future of Retail, nearfutureretail.com, if you want to go check it out. One of our lenses into the near future is immersive, though we look at other types of emerging technology as well. And we frame the near future in 3 to 5 years, in that same time frame you're asking about. And the way I look at this is that in 3 to 5 years, two things are going to happen. I don't think we'll need to be educating consumers. Boaz and Cynthia have touched on this already. They're going to expect this. They're going to expect two things. They're going to expect to see every product in 3D that is reasonably represented in 3D, maybe not cereal boxes, but any physical product you want to interact with in some way where you have utility there. But the other thing they're going to expect, thanks to Snap and all these other companies pioneering computer vision, is they're going to expect this magic lens, either the glasses or this new thin piece of glass that's the newest iPhone, to just point at anything, and it's a magic gizmo that recognizes what that thing is and finds me a thing like it, or exactly that, or something related to it. So this combination of visual recognition of the world, Google would call it visual search, and representing every product in 3D is basically going to bring every kind of shopping experience right at our fingertips in a really, really intuitive human way. So that's what I think is going to be happening in that time frame.
I love that. And Daniel, final thoughts.
Yeah, so right now, AR experiences are very much like place single product in front of me and maybe rotate around or see how it looks. I think we're going to start seeing experiences that are have multiple products, or that can start leveraging computer vision, machine learning to do stuff like product recommendations. So I'm not an interior designer. I look at my living room and I go, well, what sofa should I even pick? Imagine if I could just point my phone or my smart glasses, I just look at my living room, boom, a sofa pops up, 2 love seats pop up, a poof, some throws, some art on the wall. And I'm just like, oh, wow, maybe I can swipe to see the next configuration or stuff like that. Like, it sounds kind of science fiction, but that's sort of the direction that we're heading in. And all of that is powered by 3D models. To make that possible, you need those 3D models. So we're going to start seeing better experiences. To everyone's point who brought it up, yeah, we're going to start seeing this be an expected thing. People are going to expect 3D, and we're going to see the tools get easier and easier to make that content. In the early 2000s, you had a digital camera, you could not take product photos of products. It looked like it was taken on a potato. You'd have to go out and hire a professional photographer. We're going to see that same transition now with 3D. Right now, you have to hire experts to do all the cleanup, to do all the modeling and everything. I dream of the day where you just have a single device in your pocket, you point out a product, and it can digitize it right there as a beautiful 3D model that you can use everywhere. So that's sort of how we're seeing things go.
That's great. And I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to answer questions, but again, we will capture all of your questions. You still probably have time to keep adding some in. And I want to thank the panel. Fantastic insights. I wish I had more time with all of you, but thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to hand it back over now. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Amy.